is Alyssa Edwards from Hanover College is going to be talking about constant versus varied practice, a study of the effect of practice style. You can take it.
Okay, so what is practice? Practice is something that a lot of us are familiar with. We have it because it leads to better performance, as we've seen in various different areas. It's very general to really anything requiring skills. So that's athletics, schooling, even just things outside when you're learning to do things. And there's actually different ways that practice can be conducted. So especial skills are something that actually comes from practice. Special skills are an action by itself that falls into a specific class of actions, and then it leads to an advantage in performance. It is specific because it is performed repeatedly with little variability between each time it is performed. So an example of this is a free throw. It's performed in the same situation each time. So whether you do it in practice or in games, no matter what where the game is, you're still going to line up at the free throw line. It's still going to be 15 feet from the basket, and you're still going to shoot it. Most basketball players have the same routine to keep literally everything the same. So it's actually thought to lead to an advantage in performance because of all of this, because you practice it so often and in the same way. There's no variability to where, like with a jump shot in basketball, the conditions are constantly changing. So that's a little bit different. Like I said, there are different ways that practice can be conducted. There are different types of practices, one of which is constant practice. This is practicing something the same way repeatedly, or practicing it every time in the same way. And then there's varied practice, which is practicing something in a variety of different ways or styles. There are two studies that kind of looked at this. One is the anagram, known better as the anagram study. They had one group that was a constant practice group, and they were given the same anagram to solve over a period of time. And then there was a varied practice group who were given a variety of different anagrams to solve over a period of time. And then at the end, they both groups were asked to solve the same anagram, and it was found that the varied practice group was actually better at solving the anagram than the one that had practiced it over and over again. Another study looked at golf putting, and they had people putt in a constant group from the same distance over a period of time, and then the varied practice group putted from various distances over a period of time, and then they had them both at the end again putt from the same distance, and found that the varied practice group was actually better at putting than the constant practice group who had practiced that same distance over and over again. Varied practice often comes with a transfer of skill, also known as a transfer of learning. This is the ability to apply what you've learned to a new setting. And so it seems to promote this transfer to unpracticed movements coming from a generalized motor program. A generalized motor program is characteristics of a movement that remain constant despite changes in parameters such as wrist movement and other things. And then a study that looked at this more specifically was the beanbag study. So they had a group of kids in physical education class over a 12-week period. The constant practice group threw beanbags into a bucket 3 feet away over that 12-week period. And then the varied practice group threw beanbags into 2 buckets, one that was 2 feet away and one that was 4 feet away. And then at the end, both groups were tested on their ability to throw the beanbag into a bucket 3 feet away. And it was found that the varied practice group was actually better at throwing the beanbag into the bucket at 3 feet away, even though they had never even practiced at that distance, than the constant practice group who had practiced at that exact distance for 12 weeks in a row. Varied practice actually can lead to pushback, as a lot of people have seen with some of their studies. This is because you don't see rapid improvements with varied practice, and it requires more effort. So overall, it seems as though it's really not worth it. However, this added effort actually leads to better mastery, longer retention, and more versatility overall. So an easier way to say that is just added effort is stronger learning. But a lot of people don't realize that because our judgments on learning are actually mistaken. And so it's all about our perception on things. So that's how pushback actually comes into play with varied practice. Pushback leads us to wonder about motivational issues because when people don't see improvement, they could possibly lose motivation. There are two types of motivation. Intrinsic motivation, which is a driving force inside, and you do it because you inherently enjoy doing it. This is mainly what my study focused on with the questionnaire that I asked them that I'll introduce a little bit later on. And extrinsic motivation is a driving force outside, so you do it because you have to or you want a reward. I didn't really focus on this, seeing that it was a study. These people were willing to participate, so there was really no extrinsic motivation. Now, there are factors relating to motivation. Their expectancies of values. Expectancies are how well you feel you can do something, while values are if it means anything to you. So they have come up with this equation that usually helps people determine motivation. So they just say expectancies times value, and that's how you figure out a person's motivation to do something. My research questions, these are my research questions. What kind of practice improves free throw accuracy, varied or constant? Is there a transfer of motor skill from one spot to the next? And how do the two types of practice affect motivation and perception of improvement? And these are my hypotheses. Regarding performance, I hypothesized that the varied practice group will show greater improvement. And regarding motivation improvement, I hypothesized that the constant practice group will have more motivation and rate themselves as having more improvement overall. So for my participants, I recruited them through personal connections and with athletic teams. I sought a variety of athletes from different athletic teams at Hanover. And there were 23 female and 4 male. The age range was from 18 to 22 years old. The control group had 7 participants, the varied practice group had 10, and the constant practice group had 9. One participant was excluded after the pre-test due to actually making more free throws, so it was kind of determined that she wouldn't be able to improve enough to be added to show significant results. And then one concluded the study due to injury. There were only 12 participants that were able to fully complete the post-test due to circumstances requiring the study to conclude early, which we're all very aware of. For my materials, I used 6 goals in a public gym at a college. They were 10 feet in height. The men used regulation basketballs size 29.5 inches, and the women used women's regulation basketballs that were 28.5 inches. And so this is a few questions from my motivation questionnaire that I asked them. It was on a 6-point scale, with 1 being not true and 6 being very true. There were 3 different categories: interest and enjoyment, perceived competence, and effort and importance. There were 3 questions in each category for a total of 9 questions, and I adapted this from the intrinsic motivation inventory. I also asked them an improvement questionnaire on a 4-point scale, with 1 being not true and 4 being very true. These are the 3 questions that I asked them, and those was the whole improvement questionnaire that they were asked. We started with an informed consent, and then they shot a pre-test, so everyone shot 20 shots at the free throw line. And then I randomly assigned them to 3 groups. The group 1 was no practice whatsoever, so they were the control group. And then the other 2 groups practiced 2 times a week for 4 weeks. And so the second group was the constant practice group, so they shot 20 shots at the free throw line 2 times a week, every week for 4 weeks. And then the other group was the varied practice group, so they actually shot 10 shots at 13 feet away from the basket and 10 shots at 17 feet away from the basket, which is 2 feet in front of and 2 feet behind the free throw line. These 2 groups were given a motivation questionnaire at the end of each practice, and then they were also given an improvement questionnaire at the end of each week. So they were given the motivation questionnaire and the improvement questionnaire on the second day of practice each week. All 3 groups went to the post-test, and then they shot 20 shots at the free throw line, the 13 feet line, and the 17 feet line, and then they were all debriefed. I did not get enough in the control group to complete the study. There was only 1, so we did not use any of the control group's data in my analysis. So for my analysis, I used the 2-way repeated measures ANOVA. The variables for our repeated measure was time, and then the between subjects was the practice condition. My results on the pre-test and the post-test, There was no significant results. You can see my main effect of time and condition, and then my interaction between the two. And this actually shows the opposite of my hypothesis, as well as other studies. So my hypothesis was not supported, along with there being no significant results. We did notice that it was interesting that the varied practice group seemed to actually have no improvement whatsoever, and then the constant practice group actually did improve. My results on the perceived competence, the main effect, there was a significant main effect of perceived competence, as you can see, but the main effect of condition and the interaction, neither one were significant results. And there was no interaction between the perceived competence and the condition. And my results for effort and importance, there again was a significant main effect in the effort and importance area, as you can see, but there is no main effect for the condition. However, it is almost an interaction between the effort, importance, and condition. And so we looked at it and thought that maybe if there was more information that we could possibly get it to be an interaction. My discussion, like I said, there are no significant results, but there are some main effects, and with the effort and importance, just without some of the limitations that occurred, we could actually look to see an interaction there. And then I was actually one of the first that we found to look at an especial skill in this way, especially in like a way that normally special skills are already present, so in the game of basketball. So maybe they're different. Maybe they're a little different because with how the situations are the same versus any other skill that's in a lot of sports in a lot of different areas. There's not a lot of evidence of pushback like we expected. Maybe it was because I was a researcher and not a coach. So more often you get people that are volunteering to be a part of research, so they feel like they don't need to complain or say anything, to where if it was a coach, then possibly I could get more pushback against, oh, well, I'm not seeing improvement and other things like that. And then why didn't they get better? It could possibly be because these are all athletes and they don't play basketball for a reason. So they could be as good as they're going to get at the sport. So once they were this good, then they decided, oh, I should probably just go play soccer, play softball, because I'm way better at that and I have a lot more room to grow as an athlete. For future directions, again, the limitations, not being able to complete the study was a big thing. Maybe I didn't have enough time, and then definitely didn't have enough people to be able to complete the study. So I may have needed longer for the study to see effects. It would have been nice to complete the study in its entirety. If I had longer, like with the beanbag study, they completed it for 12 weeks. So maybe 4 weeks wasn't enough practice to see enough improvement. Needing more participants to see the effects, to see if they can get better, so you can kind of weed out the people that are as good as they're going to get. And it may be interesting to have it run by a coach within their program to see more about the pushback with the varied practice and see if they get a little bit more in terms of the motivation and the improvement areas. So any questions?
Why did you choose to just use athletes?
When John and I first talked about the research and the way we were going to set it up, we figured that we can't really start with someone who has like no athletic background, because then definitely 4 weeks wouldn't be enough to teach them a skill. So we kind of made the assumption that if we use athletes, that they have at least some sort of like coordination and are able to at least complete the skill in some way.
Last chance today. Yeah, Alyssa, I thought it's really unfortunate that, circumstances beyond your control limited your study. I thought, yeah, I was really interested in seeing the results. You set it up well, but if you would have had more data. I'm really curious about what we would have seen.
Yeah, that's what John and I talked about as well.